When
You dare
humanity
challenge
first
my
made
rule.
contact
Your rule
with
is
the
weak.
galactic
The realm
empire,
demands strength.
we were told
I
we were
am
too
the
primitive,
strength.
too
Prove it.
violent, too unpredictable
Knights of
to
the
join
realm, the
their
time has
civilized
come.
society.
We
They
ride
gave
at
us a
dawn to
choice:
defend our
submit
lands.
to their rule or be destroyed.
My lords and
But
ladies, the
humans
time
don't
has
like
come to unite.
ultimatums.
Follow
And
me,
when an
and we shall
alien
forge a new
princess
destiny.
decides she wants to marry a human diplomat against her mother's wishes, she's about to discover that humans have a very different approach to solving problems than the rest of the galaxy expects. This is the story of how a rejected wedding proposal started the most unlikely revolution in galactic history, and why the universe learned to never underestimate the creativity, stubbornness, and sheer audacity of the human spirit. Ambassador Marcus Chen had always prided himself on his ability to remain calm under pressure, but standing in the crystalline throne room of the Zephyrian Empire with 500 alien eyes staring at him, he felt his diplomatic training being put to the ultimate test. The air shimmered with an otherworldly quality that made his human lungs work harder than usual, and the gravity was just different enough to make every step feel slightly off balance. The throne room itself was a marvel that would have taken his breath away under different circumstances. Walls of living crystal pulsed with soft, bioluminescent patterns, creating an ever-shifting canvas of blues and purples that seemed to respond to the emotions of those present. The floor beneath his feet was smooth as glass but warm to the touch, made from some material that Earth scientists would spend decades trying to understand. Massive pillars stretched impossibly high, their surfaces covered in intricate carvings that told the history of a civilization that had mastered faster-than-light travel before humanity had invented the wheel. At the far end of this magnificent space sat Queen Valoliana IX on her throne, a construction of what appeared to be solidified starlight that somehow supported her ethereal form. The queen herself was both beautiful and terrifying in the way that only truly powerful beings could be. Her skin had the pale blue translucency of deep ice, with patterns of silver that moved like liquid mercury beneath the surface. Her eyes were twin galaxies, literally containing swirling stars and cosmic dust that shifted with her mood. When she was pleased, they sparkled like distant supernovas. When angry, they became black holes that seemed to pull light itself into their depths. Standing beside the throne was Princess Lirelai, and Marcus had to concentrate to keep his expression neutral. The princess was younger than her mother, her skin a lighter shade of blue with golden patterns that danced more playfully across her features. Her hair, if it could be called that, was a flowing cascade of what looked like liquid starlight that moved with its own gentle breeze. But it was her eyes that had captured Marcus's attention from their first meeting 3 months ago during the initial diplomatic sessions. Unlike her mother's cosmic swirls, Lirelai's eyes held flecks of green and gold that reminded him of Earth's forests and sunshine. The diplomatic mission had started as a standard first contact protocol. Humanity had achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago and had been cautiously exploring nearby star systems when they encountered the outer scouts of the Zephyrian Empire. What followed were months of careful communication, translation protocols, and cultural exchange that culminated in this formal meeting to discuss humanity's potential place in the galactic community. Marcus represented the United Earth government as their chief diplomatic officer, a role he had earned through 20 years of successfully negotiating everything from trade disputes to peace treaties. He had mediated conflicts between nations that had been at war for generations and had helped establish the protocols that governed humanity's expansion into space. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for alien royalty or the complex political landscape of an empire that spanned 300 star systems. The Queen's voice when she spoke resonated through the chamber with harmonics that human ears could barely process. The translation device clipped to Marcus's ear struggled to keep up with the layered meanings embedded in her words. "Ambassador Chen of the planet you call Earth," she began, her cosmic eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made him feel as if she were looking directly into his soul. "We have observed your species for some time now. Your rapid technological advancement is impressive, but your history concerns us greatly." Marcus had expected this. Earth's history was indeed violent by Zephyrian standards. The briefing materials had made it clear that the Zephyrian Empire prized peace, order, and what they called harmonious coexistence. They had built their civilization on principles of nonviolence and collective consciousness that seemed almost alien to human nature. "Your Majesty," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "Humanity acknowledges that our past has been marked by conflict. However, we have evolved significantly in recent centuries. Our current global government was formed specifically to prevent the wars that once plagued our world. We seek peaceful cooperation with all species we encounter in the galaxy." A ripple of whispers moved through the assembled courtiers, aliens of various species that Marcus was still learning to distinguish. Some looked vaguely humanoid, while others defied easy description. He noticed several taking notes on devices that hovered in the air around them, recording every word for later analysis. Queen Valeriana's expression remained unreadable. "Evolution requires more than mere centuries, Ambassador. Your species exhibits what we consider dangerous unpredictability. You are capable of both remarkable cooperation and devastating destruction, often simultaneously. This makes you unsuitable for membership in our empire." Marcus felt his heart sink, but he had prepared for this possibility. "Your Majesty, might I respectfully suggest that unpredictability could also be viewed as adaptability? Humanity's ability to find creative solutions to complex problems has served us well throughout our history. We believe this trait could be valuable to the galactic community." "Creative solutions," the Queen repeated, her tone suggesting she found the concept distasteful. "We prefer predictable, harmonious solutions that maintain stability across our territories. Your species' tendency toward what you call thinking outside the box has led to some of your greatest achievements, but also to your most terrible failures." As the formal discussion continued, Marcus became increasingly aware of Princess Lyralei's attention. She had not spoken during the proceedings, but her golden-flecked eyes never left him. There was something in her gaze that seemed different from the cool assessment of the other Zephyrians. Where they looked at him as a curiosity or potential threat, she seemed genuinely interested in him as an individual. The Queen continued her formal rejection of humanity's petition to join the Empire. "We offer you a choice, Ambassador Chen. Your species may submit to our guidance and accept a protectorate status, allowing us to help you evolve beyond your current limitations. Alternatively, you may remain isolated in your corner of the galaxy, with the understanding that any expansion beyond your current system will be viewed as a threat to galactic stability." Marcus had expected this ultimatum as well, though it still stung to hear it spoken so bluntly. The idea of humanity submitting to alien rule was unthinkable, but the alternative of permanent isolation was hardly appealing either. He was about to respond when Princess Lyralei stepped forward. "Mother," she said, her voice carrying musical tones that made Marcus think of wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Perhaps we are being too hasty in our judgment." The Queen's cosmic eyes swirled dangerously. "Lyralei, this is not the time for your romantic notions about primitive species." The princess's golden patterns flared brighter, a sign Marcus had learned indicated strong emotion in Zephyrians. "With respect, Mother, I have spent considerable time studying human culture and history. Yes, they are capable of violence, but they are also capable of extraordinary compassion and self-sacrifice. Their art, their literature, their music, these show a depth of emotion and creativity that we have not encountered in other species." Marcus watched this exchange with fascination and growing concern. He had not expected to have an advocate among the Zephyrian royal family, and he certainly had not expected that advocate to be the princess herself. The implications were potentially dangerous for both of them. "Princess," he said carefully, "I appreciate your support, but I would not want to cause any difficulty between you and your mother." Lyralei turned to him, and for a moment the massive throne room seemed to fade away. There was something in her expression that transcended species barriers, a warmth and understanding that spoke to something fundamental about conscious beings seeking connection across the vast emptiness of space. "Ambassador Chen," she said, "you have shown me that there are other ways to see the universe. Your people's stories, your dreams of exploration and discovery, your refusal to accept limits, these things resonate with something I did not know existed within me. The Queen's patience was clearly wearing thin. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees, and the bioluminescent patterns on the walls shifted to deeper, more ominous hues. "Enough," Queen Valeriana declared. "Ambassador Chen, you have our answer. Humanity may choose protectorate status or isolation. There will be no further discussion on this matter." Marcus bowed respectfully. "I understand, Your Majesty. I will convey your offer to my government for consideration." As he turned to leave, accompanied by his small human delegation and their Zephyrian escorts, Princess Lirale spoke again. "Ambassador, would it be possible for me to visit your ship before you depart? I am curious about human technology and would like to see how your people have achieved faster-than-light travel with such limited resources." Marcus paused, recognizing the request for what it really was. The princess wanted to speak with him privately, away from her mother's watchful eyes. It was a dangerous proposition that could complicate an already delicate situation, but he found himself nodding. "Of course, Your Highness, we would be honored to host you." The Queen's cosmic eyes fixed on both of them with an intensity that made the air itself seem to crackle with energy. 1 hour, Lirale, no more. As they left the throne room, Marcus could feel the weight of hundreds of alien gazes on his back. He had come to the Zephyrian Empire hoping to secure humanity's place in the galactic community. Instead, he found himself caught in what appeared to be a family conflict between one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy and her daughter. The fact that he was somehow the focus of that conflict made everything infinitely more complicated. His ship, the UES Endeavor, was docked at the orbital station that served as the Empire's diplomatic center. It was a modest vessel by Zephyrian standards, but it represented the pinnacle of human engineering and had carried him safely across nearly 200 light-years of space. As he walked through its familiar corridors an hour later, preparing to receive Princess Lirale, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed since accepting this assignment. He had been chosen for this mission partly because of his diplomatic skills, but also because of his background in xenobiology and comparative cultures. The UEG had wanted someone who could understand and relate to alien species while still representing humanity's interests effectively. What they had not anticipated was the possibility that their ambassador might become personally involved in alien politics. Princess Lirale arrived precisely on time, accompanied by a single guard who remained outside the ship at her request. As she stepped aboard the Endeavor, Marcus was struck again by how the princess seemed to embody the beauty and mystery of the cosmos itself. In the more familiar environment of his own ship, with Earth's soft yellow lighting and the subtle hum of human technology, the contrast between their species became even more apparent. "Your ship is smaller than I expected," she said, running her fingers along the bulkhead with obvious curiosity. "But there is something about it that feels alive." "Purposeful," Marcus smiled. "Human engineering tends to prioritize function over form. We build things to work reliably under extreme conditions, even if they're not as elegant as Zephyrian technology." "Elegance is not always the most important quality," Lirale replied. "Sometimes strength and determination matter more." They made their way to the ship's observation deck, where a large viewport offered a stunning view of the Zephyrian home system. 3 suns danced in complex orbits around each other, their combined light painting the nearby planets in shifting hues of gold and crimson. It was breathtakingly beautiful. But Marcus found himself thinking of Earth's single yellow sun and the simple clarity of light it provided. "Ambassador," Lirale said, her voice softer now that they were alone, "I need to tell you something that I could not say in front of my mother." Marcus turned from the viewport to face her, noting the way her golden patterns pulsed with nervous energy. "What is it, Your Highness? And what I need to tell you is that my interest in your species, in humanity, is not merely academic." She paused, her cosmic eyes meeting his. "I believe I have developed what your people would call feelings for you personally." The admission hung in the air between them like a live electrical charge. Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat as he processed what she had just told him. An alien princess, heir to one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy, was confessing romantic feelings for a human diplomat. The political implications were staggering, but more immediately Marcus realized that he had developed similar feelings for her. Lyrai, he said carefully, I am honored by your words, and I must confess that I have felt a connection with you as well. But surely you understand how impossible this situation is. Your mother has already made it clear that humanity is not welcome in the Empire. A personal relationship between us would only make things worse. The princess moved closer to him, her starlight hair flowing around her shoulders like a living aurora. What if I told you that there might be another way? A way for humanity to prove itself worthy of galactic citizenship while also allowing us to explore whatever this is between us. Marcus felt a chill of premonition. What kind of way? Lyralei's eyes sparkled with an intensity that reminded him of supernovas being born. There are ancient laws in our empire, older than my mother's reign, that govern succession and marriage. If I were to choose a mate from outside the empire, that choice could be challenged through the trials of worth. If my chosen mate could prove himself and his species worthy through a series of tests, then not only would our union be recognized, but his people would be granted full membership in the empire. And if he failed these trials, then both he and his entire species would be banished from the galaxy forever, Lorelei replied quietly. It is not a choice to be made lightly. Marcus stared out at the alien stars, his mind racing through the implications. The princess was offering humanity a chance at galactic citizenship, but the price of failure would be catastrophic. It was exactly the kind of impossible choice that humans seemed destined to face throughout their history. How long do I have to decide? He asked. My mother will expect an answer to her ultimatum within 7 of your Earth days, Lirale said. But if you choose to invoke the trials of worth, you must do so before she formally announces your species' status to the Empire. 7 days to decide the fate of humanity's future in the galaxy. 7 days to choose between certain isolation and an impossible gamble that could lead to either unprecedented glory or complete destruction. As Marcus looked into Princess Lyralei's eyes, seeing the hope and fear swirling there like distant galaxies, he realized that this was no longer just about diplomacy or politics. This was about two beings from impossibly different worlds who had somehow found each other across the vast emptiness of space, and the question of whether love could really conquer the barriers between species, cultures, and entire civilizations. The Queen had said no to humanity joining her empire, but her daughter was offering a different path forward. The question was whether Marcus and humanity were brave enough to take it. Marcus Chen spent the next 48 hours in what he later described as the most intense period of soul-searching in his life. The weight of potentially deciding humanity's fate in the galaxy pressed down on him like a physical force, making sleep impossible and food tasteless. He paced the corridors of the Endeavor, ran countless simulations in his head, and engaged in lengthy encrypted communications with Earth that left him more uncertain than ever. The response from the United Earth government had been predictably mixed. President Liu had been cautious, emphasizing the catastrophic consequences of failure. The military advisors had questioned whether the trials would be fair or if they were walking into an elaborate trap. The scientists were fascinated by the technological and cultural exchange opportunities. The philosophers debated the ethics of one person making such a momentous decision for all humanity. But it was the message from his mentor, former Ambassador Elena Rodriguez, that cut through all the political noise and spoke directly to his heart. Marcus, her weathered face, had said from the small holographic projector, I've known you for 15 years, and in all that time you've never backed down from a challenge when you believed it was right. Trust your instincts, trust humanity. And if you found something worth fighting for out there among the stars, then fight for it. Now, standing in the diplomatic quarters assigned to him on the Zephyrian station, Marcus stared at his reflection in the mirror's smooth wall. He looked older than his 43 years, the stress of the situation having carved new lines around his eyes and mouth. But there was also something else there, a spark of determination that reminded him why he had become a diplomat in the first place. A soft chime indicated someone was requesting entry to his quarters. When he opened the door, he found Princess Lyrale standing in the corridor, but she was not alone. Behind her stood 3 figures that Marcus had not encountered before, aliens whose species he could not immediately identify. Lyrale, he said, stepping back to allow them entry. I wasn't expecting you. I apologize for the intrusion, Ambassador, but there are things you need to know before you make your decision. Things my mother would prefer remained hidden. The princess's golden patterns were muted, pulsing slowly with what Marcus had learned indicated deep concern. These are my closest advisors, the only beings in the Empire I trust completely. The three aliens entered his quarters with fluid grace. The first was tall and ethereal, with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that held depths of ancient wisdom. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that suggested great age and experience. "I am Keeper Vorthak," it said, inclining its head respectfully. "I maintain the archive of trials, the historical records of all previous challenges to imperial law." The second alien was smaller, more compact, with crystalline features that refracted light into rainbow patterns. Its voice chimed like distant bells when it spoke. "I am Counselor Xeris, advisor on interspecies relations and cultural integration. I have studied the histories of all species that have joined or been rejected by the Empire." The third alien was perhaps the most unsettling to human eyes. Its form seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, never quite maintaining a consistent shape for more than a few seconds. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. "I am Strategist Flux," it said, its form briefly solidifying into something vaguely humanoid. "I analyze probability matrices and potential outcomes of complex scenarios." Marcus gestured for them to take seats on the various pieces of furniture his quarters provided, though he noticed that Flux simply formed itself into something resembling a chair. "I appreciate you coming, but I have to ask, why the secrecy? If Princess Lyrelay trusts you, why wouldn't the Queen?" Keeper Vorthak's ancient eyes seemed to look through Marcus rather than at him. "Because, Ambassador Chen, we believe the Queen has allowed her fear of change to cloud her judgment regarding your species. We have studied humanity extensively, and we believe you represent something the Empire needs, a catalyst for growth and adaptation." "The Empire has grown complacent," Counselor Xeris added, its crystalline features shifting to more serious configurations. "For 3,000 years we have maintained peace through rigid order and predictability. But the galaxy is changing, and species that cannot adapt will eventually stagnate and decline." Strategist Flux rippled with what might have been agreement. "My probability analyses suggest that the Empire's current trajectory leads to eventual stagnation and decline. However, the introduction of humanity's unpredictable nature could create new pathways for growth and evolution." Princess Lyrelay moved to stand beside Marcus, her presence both comforting and concerning. "What they're trying to tell you, Marcus, is that your choice isn't just about humanity's future in the Empire. It's about the Empire's future itself." Marcus felt his head spinning with the implications. "Are you saying that the Queen is wrong about humanity being a threat to galactic stability?" "Not wrong exactly," Keeper Vorthak replied carefully. "Humanity is indeed unpredictable and potentially disruptive, but disruption is not always negative. Sometimes it is necessary for growth. However," Counselor Xeris interjected, "you should understand that the trials of worth have not been invoked for over 800 years. The last species to attempt them was completely destroyed when they failed." The weight of that statement settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Marcus had known the stakes were high, but hearing the actual historical precedent made the danger more real. "Tell me about these trials," he said quietly. "What would I actually be facing?" Strategist Flux's form shifted into something resembling a three-dimensional map. "The trials of worth consist of 5 challenges designed to test different aspects of a species' character and capabilities. Each trial must be completed successfully before proceeding to the next. The Trial of Wisdom," Keeper Vorthak began, "tests the candidate's ability to solve complex problems that have no obvious solutions. It requires creativity, intelligence, and the willingness to think beyond conventional approaches. The Trial of Courage," Counselor Xeris continued, "places the candidate in situations of extreme physical and psychological danger. It tests not just bravery, but the ability to make difficult decisions under pressure. The Trial of Compassion," Princess Lyrelay said softly, requires the candidate to demonstrate that their species is capable of empathy and selflessness. The trial of strength, Flux added, its form shifting to suggest musculature and power, tests not just physical capabilities but the inner strength to persevere when all hope seems lost. And finally, Keeper Vorthak concluded, the trial of unity, which requires the candidate to demonstrate their species' ability to work together and form lasting alliances with other beings. And if I fail any one of these trials, then humanity is banished from the galaxy forever, Lyrale said, her voice barely above a whisper. No trade, no communication, no contact of any kind. Your species would be effectively quarantined to your home system for all eternity. But if you succeed, Flux added, its form brightening with what might have been excitement, humanity would be granted full membership in the Empire with all the rights and privileges that entails. Access to our technology, our trade networks, our knowledge accumulated over millennia. Marcus walked to the viewport and stared out at the swirling cosmic dance of the three suns. The beauty of the scene was unchanged, but now it carried a weight of significance that made his chest tight with anxiety. There's something else you need to know, Princess Lyrale said, approaching him at the viewport. There, the trials cannot be undertaken alone. While the candidate represents their species, they are allowed to choose companions to assist them. The trial recognizes that true strength comes from cooperation, not isolation. How many companions? Marcus asked. Traditionally 5, Keeper Vorthak replied, 1 for each trial, though they may participate in multiple challenges if desired. Marcus's mind immediately went to his crew aboard the Endeavor. Captain Sarah Martinez, his military liaison and security chief, would be essential for the physical challenges. Dr. James Park, his xenobiologist and cultural specialist, would be invaluable for understanding alien psychology and behavior. Engineer Lisa Thompson knew human technology better than anyone and could adapt solutions to unexpected problems. Communications Officer David Kim had proven his ability to forge connections across cultural boundaries during the initial contact protocols, but choosing his team meant asking them to risk everything alongside him. It meant asking them to potentially sacrifice their lives for a chance at galactic citizenship. The moral weight of that decision was almost unbearable. I need time to think, Marcus said finally, and I need to speak with my team. Of course, Lyrale replied. But remember, you have only 5 more days before my mother expects an answer to her ultimatum. As the small group prepared to leave, Strategist Flux lingered for a moment, its form shifting nervously. Ambassador, it said in its omnidirectional voice, there is one more thing you should know. My probability calculations suggest that while the trials are indeed dangerous, humanity has characteristics that might give you advantages other species lacked. What kind of advantages? Your species' evolutionary history has been shaped by constant adaptation to changing environments and circumstances. You are comfortable with uncertainty in a way that most galactic species are not. You are also capable of rapid tactical thinking and creative problem-solving under pressure. These traits have served you well throughout your history, and they may serve you well in the trials. After they left, Marcus sat in the gathering darkness of his quarters wrestling with the most important decision in human history. The rational part of his mind said the risks were too great, that he had no right to gamble humanity's entire future on his personal feelings for an alien princess. But another part of him, the part that had driven humanity to leave Earth and reach for the stars, whispered that this was exactly the kind of challenge that defined what it meant to be human. He activated his communicator and requested a private meeting with his senior staff. Within minutes, the 5 people who had shared this incredible journey with him were gathered in the Endeavor's conference room. Captain Martinez sat straight and alert, her military bearing unchanged despite the extraordinary circumstances. Dr. Park looked tired but fascinated, his scientific mind clearly working through the implications of everything they had learned. Engineer Thompson wore her usual expression of focused concern, while Communications Officer Kim appeared both excited and apprehensive.
I suppose you're wondering why I've called you here, Marcus began.
Actually, Captain Martinez interrupted with a slight smile, we've been wondering when you were going to ask us to help you with these trials. Marcus stared at her in surprise. How did you know about the trials? Word travels fast on a station this size. Doc Park replied. Plus, it wasn't hard to figure out that something significant was happening when Princess Lyralee started visiting with ancient archivists and probability specialists. So you know what I'm considering? We know you're considering risking everything for a chance at galactic citizenship, Engineer Thompson said bluntly, and we know it involves some kind of challenges that could get us all killed. Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. You don't understand the full implications. If we fail, humanity is banished from the galaxy forever. No more exploration, no more contact with alien species, no more expansion beyond our solar system. And personally, we'd probably all die in the attempt. Marcus, Captain Martinez said quietly, I've served with you for 8 years. I've seen you negotiate peace treaties that everyone said were impossible. I've watched you find solutions to problems that had no obvious answers. If you think this is worth the risk, then we trust your judgment. Besides, Dr. Park added with a grin that seemed out of place given the gravity of the situation, when will we ever get another chance to participate in ancient alien trials that will test the very essence of human nature? From a scientific perspective, it's the opportunity of several lifetimes. And from an engineering perspective, Thompson chimed in, humanity's always been at its best when we're facing impossible odds with inadequate resources. It's practically our specialty. Marcus looked around the table at these 5 remarkable individuals who had followed him across the galaxy and were now prepared to risk everything on his judgment. They represented the best of what humanity could offer: courage, intelligence, loyalty, and the unshakable belief that any challenge could be overcome with enough determination and creativity. All right, then, he said finally, his voice steady despite the enormity of what he was about to commit them all to. Let's go make history. The next morning, Marcus requested a formal audience with Queen Valeriana. This time the throne room felt different, charged with intention that seemed to make the very air vibrate with anticipation. Word of his possible decision had apparently spread throughout the court, and the assembled aliens watched him with a mixture of curiosity, excitement, and fear. Princess Lyralee stood beside her mother's throne, her golden patterns pulsing with barely contained emotion. Her cosmic eyes met his across the vast chamber, and Marcus felt a surge of certainty that whatever happened next, he was making the right choice. Your Majesty, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the crystalline space, I have considered your generous offer regarding humanity's place in the galaxy. Queen Valeriana's cosmic eyes swirled with dangerous energy. And what is your answer, Ambassador Chen? Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of human history on his shoulders. With all respect, Your Majesty, I must decline your offer of protectorate status. Instead, I invoke the ancient right of the trials of worth as set forth in the foundational laws of the Zephyrian Empire. The reaction was immediate and electric. Gasps and exclamations erupted from the assembled courtiers in a dozen different languages. Some aliens recoiled in shock, others leaned forward with interest, and a few actually fled the chamber entirely. Queen Valeriana rose from her throne, her form suddenly radiating an energy that made the air itself crackle with power. When she spoke, her voice resonated through dimensions that human ears could barely perceive. You dare invoke the trials of worth? Do you understand what you have just committed your species to, human? I understand perfectly, Your Majesty, Marcus replied, somehow managing to keep his voice steady despite the cosmic forces swirling around him. I also understand that humanity has never accepted limitations when we believe there was a better way forward. We choose to earn our place in the galaxy rather than accept it as a gift with conditions. For a long moment, the Queen stared at him with eyes that held the birth and death of stars. Then, slowly, a smile that was both beautiful and terrifying spread across her ethereal features. Very well, Ambassador Chen of Earth. The trials of worth are hereby invoked. You have 7 days to prepare yourself and your chosen companions. The trials will begin at the next conjunction of our 3 suns, and they will continue until you have either succeeded in all 5 challenges or failed in your attempt. She paused, her cosmic gaze shifting to include his entire team who had entered the throne room behind him. Know this, humans, in 800 years no species has succeeded in these trials. Those who failed were not merely banished, they ceased to exist entirely. Are you prepared to face that possibility? Captain Martinez stepped forward, her military bearing perfect despite the circumstances. Your Majesty, humanity has faced extinction before. We prefer to meet our challenges head-on rather than live diminished lives. Interesting, the Queen mused. We shall see if your courage matches your words. As they left the throne room, Marcus felt both exhilarated and terrified. They had committed themselves to a path that would either elevate humanity to galactic citizenship or destroy them entirely. There was no middle ground, no compromise, no safety net. But as he looked at his team and saw the determination in their eyes, he felt a familiar surge of human optimism. They had 7 days to prepare for challenges that had destroyed every previous attempt, 7 days to figure out how to succeed where countless others had failed, 7 days to prove that when the universe said something was impossible, humans liked to prove it wrong. The 7 days of preparation passed in a blur of intense study, training, and planning that pushed the human team to their absolute limits. Princess Lyralee had arranged for them to have access to the Imperial Archives, vast databases containing the accumulated knowledge of 300 civilizations across 3,000 years of galactic history. The sheer volume of information available was overwhelming, but it also provided crucial insights into what they might face. Dr. James Park threw himself into studying the previous trials with the obsessive focus that had made him one of Earth's leading xenobiologists. Working 18-hour days in the archives, he compiled detailed analyses of the 23 species that had attempted the trials of worth over the past 800 years. The pattern that emerged was both enlightening and terrifying. Every species that attempted the trials had one thing in common, he reported to the team during their daily briefing session. They all failed because they approached the challenges using their species' natural strengths while ignoring their fundamental weaknesses. Explain, Captain Martinez requested, her sharp military mind immediately grasping the tactical implications. Take the Corinthian Collective, Dr. Park continued, pulling up holographic displays that showed insectoid aliens with magnificent crystalline wings. They were a hive mind species with perfect coordination and flawless cooperation. They excelled in the trial of unity, naturally, but failed catastrophically in the trial of wisdom because they couldn't think as individuals when creative, independent thought was required. Engineer Lisa Thompson leaned forward, studying the tactical readouts. What about the opposite? Individual-focused species? The Zarnak Empire tried 600 years ago, Park replied, switching to displays showing proud warrior-like beings with metallic skin and burning eyes. Ultimate individualists, perfect for the trial of courage, but they literally couldn't cooperate enough to survive the trial of unity. They turned on each other before the trial was even complete. Marcus absorbed this information while simultaneously reviewing communications from Earth. The world government was sending constant updates and advice, though much of it contradictory. Some officials wanted him to abandon the attempt and accept isolation rather than risk total destruction. Others pushed for aggressive tactics that might work in human conflicts but could prove disastrous in alien trials designed by fundamentally different minds. The key insight, Communications Officer David Kim observed, is that every previous species tried to use their natural advantages without addressing their natural limitations, but humans might have something unique. We're generalists rather than specialists. Exactly, Dr. Park confirmed excitedly. Every other species in the galactic database shows clear evolutionary specialization. Hive minds, warrior cultures, pure logic-based societies, empathic collectives, but humans evolved as adaptable generalists. We're not the strongest, fastest, smartest, or most unified species, but we can do a little bit of everything reasonably well, Captain Martinez nodded thoughtfully. It's basic military strategy. A force that's prepared for anything will usually beat a force that's optimized for one specific type of combat. During these preparation days, Princess Lyralee visited them frequently, often accompanied by her trusted advisors. Marcus found these interactions both helpful and emotionally challenging. Each conversation reminded him that his feelings for her were genuine and growing stronger, but also that failure in the trials would mean never seeing her again.
"There's something I need to tell you," Lee Relay said during one of their private conversation in the Endeavor's observation deck.
They stood together watching the Triple Suns perform their eternal dance, and Marcus was struck by how natural it felt to have her beside him despite the vast differences in their nature. "What is it?" he asked, though part of him dreaded the answer. "The trials are not just tests of capability," she said quietly, her golden patterns pulsing with nervous energy. "They are also tests of character. Each trial will present you with choices that reveal the fundamental nature of your species. The trial masters will be watching not just whether you succeed, but how you choose to succeed." Marcus felt a chill of understanding. "You mean it's possible to complete the trials successfully but still fail if we do it the wrong way?" "Precisely. The Zarnak Empire I mentioned earlier actually completed 3 of the 5 trials before their failure, but they did so through methods that demonstrated they would be a destabilizing influence in the Empire. The trial masters judged them unworthy based on their choices, not their capabilities. This revelation changed everything about their preparation strategy. It wasn't enough to figure out how to overcome the challenges. They had to do so in ways that demonstrated human values were compatible with galactic civilization. "What kind of choices are we talking about?" Marcus asked. Lyrelai hesitated before answering. "I cannot give you specific details as that would invalidate the trials, but I can tell you that each trial will present opportunities to sacrifice others for personal gain, to choose expedient solutions over ethical ones, or to prioritize individual success over collective welfare. How you navigate these moral landscapes will matter as much as whether you achieve the trial objectives." The night before the trials began, Marcus found himself unable to sleep. He walked the corridors of the Endeavor, checking and rechecking equipment they might need, reviewing contingency plans that probably wouldn't survive contact with alien trial conditions, and trying not to think about the very real possibility that this would be his last night alive. He found Captain Martinez in the ship's small gymnasium, running combat drills with an intensity that suggested she was equally unable to rest. Her movements were precise and controlled, but Marcus could see the tension in her shoulders and the slight tremor in her hands when she thought no one was watching. "Nervous?" he asked. "Terrified," she admitted without stopping her routine. "But that's good. Fear keeps you alert, keeps you thinking. The moment you stop being afraid in a situation like this is the moment you make fatal mistakes." "Any regrets about volunteering for this?" Martinez finally stopped her exercises and turned to face him. "Marcus, do you know why I transferred from the Navy to the Diplomatic Corps 8 years ago?" He shook his head, realizing he had never asked about her background before their partnership began. "I was a fighter pilot during the Resource Wars. Good at my job, won some battles, lost some friends. But I got tired of fighting over scraps when I knew there was a whole galaxy out there waiting for us. When the space program started looking for military liaisons for diplomatic missions, I jumped at the chance." She walked to the small viewport and stared out at the alien stars. "I've spent my entire adult life believing that humanity's future lay out there among those stars. Tomorrow, we find out if I was right. Even if we die trying, at least we'll have given everything for the dream." Marcus found himself deeply moved by her words. It struck him that each member of his team had made similar sacrifices to be here, giving up comfortable lives on Earth for the uncertain promise of exploration and discovery. They deserved better than to have their dreams destroyed because of his personal feelings for an alien princess. "Sarah," he said quietly, "I need you to know that if we don't make it, it won't be because we weren't good enough. It'll be because I let my personal feelings cloud my judgment." Martinez turned to him with a look of genuine surprise. "Marcus, do you really think that's why we're here, because you have feelings for the princess?" "Isn't it?" "You arrogant fool," she said with a slight smile. "We're here because for the first time in human history we have a chance to earn our place in a galactic community through our own merits rather than submitting to someone else's authority. We're here because you recognized an opportunity that nobody else saw and had the courage to take it. Your feelings for Princess Lirelei might have opened the door, but we walked through it because it was the right thing to do. The conversation was interrupted by an alert from the ship's communication system. Dr. Park's voice crackled over the intercom. "Marcus, you need to get to the archive immediately." "I think I've found something important." They found Dr. Park in the Imperial Archive's main research chamber, surrounded by holographic displays showing complex mathematical equations and historical data streams. His eyes were red with exhaustion, but his excitement was palpable. "I've been analyzing the energy signatures from previous trials," he said without preamble. "The trial chambers aren't just testing grounds, they're adaptive environments that respond to the psychology and physiology of the participants." Engineer Thompson, who had been working on equipment modifications in the adjacent lab, looked up with interest. "What do you mean by adaptive?" "The trials literally change based on who's taking them," Park explained, manipulating the holographic displays to show energy pattern comparisons. A hive mind species faces different versions of the challenges than an individualistic species. The trials adapt to test each species' specific weaknesses and strengths. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "Which means we can't rely on historical data to predict exactly what we'll face." "Exactly. But here's the interesting part. The adaptation process takes time. The chambers need several hours to fully analyze and adjust to a new species. If we can understand how they're adapting to us, we might be able to prepare more effectively." Communications Officer Kim joined them from his own research station. "I've been monitoring Imperial communication networks, and there's something else you should know. Word of the trials has spread throughout the Empire. We're getting attention from species in all 300 systems. Some are betting on our success. Others are preparing to celebrate our failure." "Wonderful," Marcus muttered. "No pressure at all. Actually," Kim continued with a grin that seemed inappropriately cheerful given the circumstances, "some of the messages are supportive. Apparently, there are species in the Empire who aren't entirely happy with the current system. They see our attempt as a chance for positive change, or as a cautionary tale about the dangers of challenging authority," Thompson added pragmatically. The final day of preparation dawned with the spectacular conjunction of the 3 suns that marked the traditional time for beginning the trials. Marcus and his team performed final equipment checks, reviewed their strategies one last time, and shared what might be their final meal together as free humans. Princess Lirelei arrived to escort them to the trial chambers, accompanied by a formal procession that included Queen Valeriana herself. The Queen's presence surprised Marcus. Apparently, royal attendance at the trials was unusual, reserved for particularly significant attempts. "She wants to watch us fail personally," Captain Martinez observed quietly. "Or she wants to be there when we succeed," Dr. Park countered with determined optimism. The trial chambers were located in the most ancient part of the Imperial complex, in structures that predated even the Zephyrian Empire itself. The corridors were carved from some material that seemed to absorb and reflect light simultaneously, creating an unsettling effect that made depth perception difficult. Ancient symbols covered the walls, not Zephyrian script but something far older and more mysterious. These chambers were built by the precursors, Keeper Vorthak explained as they walked, the original architects of galactic civilization, whose technology we still do not fully understand. They vanished over 10,000 years ago, but their testing protocols remain active. The first trial chamber was a vast spherical space that seemed to extend infinitely in all directions. As they stepped inside, Marcus felt a disorienting sensation as if gravity had become optional. The walls, ceiling, and floor were indistinguishable, all covered in the same shifting patterns of light and shadow. "The trial of wisdom," announced a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. It spoke in perfect English, though Marcus was certain the chamber had never encountered humans before. "Candidate species, human. Adaptation protocols, initiating." The space around them began to change, walls materializing out of nowhere to form a complex maze-like structure. But this was no ordinary maze. The walls were transparent from one side but opaque from the other, creating a puzzle that required spatial reasoning far beyond normal human capabilities. Objective, the voice continued. Navigate the wisdom maze and reach the center chamber within one standard time period. Additional objective, rescue the trapped entities you will encounter along the way. Warning, each rescue attempt will cost valuable time and may prevent completion of the primary objective. Marcus felt his heart sink as he understood the true nature of the challenge. This wasn't just about solving a puzzle. It was about choosing between personal success and helping others. The trial was designed to test whether humans would sacrifice others for their own advancement. Standard time period in human measurements, the voice added, is approximately 47 minutes. They began immediately, with Dr. Park taking the lead in analyzing the maze's structure while Engineer Thompson worked on understanding the physics of the transparent walls. Captain Martinez scouted ahead for potential threats while Communications Officer Kim attempted to establish contact with the trapped entities they were supposed to rescue. The first entity they encountered was a small, crystalline being trapped in a spatial fold that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. It was clearly in distress, but freeing it would require significant time and effort that could prevent them from reaching the center chamber. It could be a test, Captain Martinez pointed out, an artificial construct designed to slow us down. Or it could be a real being whose life depends on our choice, Dr. Park replied, already beginning to work on the spatial equations needed for a rescue. Marcus made the decision that he hoped would define humanity's character in the eyes of the trial masters. We save everyone we can. If that means we fail the trial, at least we fail as humans. They freed the crystalline being, which immediately began helping them navigate the maze with its ability to perceive multiple dimensions. The assistance proved invaluable, allowing them to move faster through the complex structure despite the time lost in the rescue. The second trapped entity was more challenging, a gaseous being caught in a temporal loop that repeated every few minutes. Breaking the loop required Thompson to jury-rig a temporal stabilizer using equipment they had brought for entirely different purposes. "This is taking too long," Martinez warned, checking their remaining time. "We've got less than 20 minutes left and we're not even halfway to the center." "Then we move faster," Marcus replied, "but we don't leave anyone behind." The third entity was the most difficult yet, a hive-mind creature whose multiple bodies were scattered throughout different sections of the maze. Rescuing it meant splitting up their team, something that violated every tactical principle Martinez had ever learned. "This is exactly what the trial wants us to do," she argued. "Spread ourselves too thin, make mistakes, fail the primary objective." "Maybe," Marcus admitted. "But if we abandon our principles to succeed in the trial, what does that say about humanity's worthiness?" They split up, each team member working to free a different part of the hive mind creature while still trying to navigate toward the center chamber. It was chaotic, dangerous, and probably foolish from a purely tactical standpoint. But it worked. The rescued entities proved to be incredibly valuable allies, each contributing unique abilities that helped the human team overcome obstacles they could never have managed alone. The crystalline being could see through dimensional barriers. The gaseous entity could manipulate temporal fields to slow down certain sections of the maze, and the hive mind creature could coordinate complex actions across multiple locations simultaneously. With 5 minutes remaining, they'd burst into the center chamber as a united group of multiple species working together toward a common goal. Marcus realized that this was exactly what the trial had been designed to test, not whether humans could solve puzzles, but whether they could put cooperation and compassion ahead of personal advancement. "Trial of wisdom completed," the chamber announced. "Evaluation. Passing. Note: candidate species demonstrates unusual approach to problem solving, prioritizing collective welfare over individual advancement. This approach is intriguing." As they exited the first chamber, Marcus felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. They had passed the first trial, but he knew the challenges would only get more difficult from here. Princess Lirelei was waiting for them outside the chamber, her golden patterns bright with excitement and relief. "That was magnificent," she said quietly. "No species has ever approached the trial of wisdom that way before. Most try to complete the primary objective as quickly as possible, and most fail. Marcus observed. Exactly. The trial masters expect participants to choose between success and compassion. By refusing to make that choice, by finding a way to achieve both, you've demonstrated something remarkable about human nature. Queen Valeriana approached them, her cosmic eyes swirling with what might have been newfound respect. Interesting methodology, humans. We shall see if your unique approach serves you as well in the remaining trials. As they prepared for the next challenge, Marcus realized that they had stumbled onto something crucial. The trials weren't just tests to pass, they were opportunities to show the Empire what humanity could bring to galactic civilization. Each challenge was a chance to demonstrate that human unpredictability wasn't a weakness, but a strength that could benefit everyone. 4 more trials lay ahead, each designed to push them to their absolute limits. But for the first time since this entire adventure began, Marcus felt genuinely optimistic about their chances. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to change the galaxy itself. The success of their first trial had created a ripple effect throughout the Imperial complex that Marcus hadn't anticipated. As they prepared for the trial of courage, small groups of aliens from various species began gathering outside the trial chambers, watching the proceedings with intense interest. Word was spreading through the Empire's communication networks that the humans were taking an unprecedented approach to the ancient challenges. This is highly unusual, Keeper Vorthak informed them during a brief respite between trials. Typically, trials are witnessed only by the immediate royal family and essential functionaries. The level of galactic attention you're receiving is unprecedented. Dr. Park, ever the scholar, found this development fascinating rather than intimidating. It makes sense from an anthropological perspective, he observed. We're not just representing humanity anymore. We're representing the possibility that the established order can be changed. No pressure, Engineer Thompson muttered, but Marcus could see the spark of determination in her eyes that meant she was ready for whatever came next. The trial of courage chamber was fundamentally different from the wisdom maze. Where the first trial had been all curves and shifting geometries, this space was harsh and angular, filled with jagged surfaces and an oppressive atmosphere that seemed designed to trigger primal fears. The air itself felt thick and threatening, and the lighting cast shadows that moved independently of their sources. The trial of courage, the chamber's voice announced, its tone deeper and more ominous than before. Candidate species, human adaptation protocols, complete. Objective, navigate the fear labyrinth and retrieve the beacon of hope from its center. Warning. The labyrinth will manifest your deepest fears and use them against you. Additional challenge. Each member of your team will face their fears individually, but success requires collective action. The chamber began to shift and change, walls rising from the floor to separate the 5 humans into individual passages. Marcus found himself alone in a corridor that seemed to stretch infinitely in both directions, lit by a sickly phosphorescent glow that made everything look diseased and wrong. Then the fears began. The first thing he encountered was himself, or rather a twisted version of himself that represented all his worst qualities magnified beyond recognition. This other Marcus was arrogant, selfish, and callous, caring nothing for the consequences of his decisions on others. The doppelganger spoke in his voice, listing every mistake he had ever made, every time his pride had caused harm to others. "You've doomed humanity," the false Marcus taunted, "all because you couldn't resist playing hero for an alien princess. How many billions will die because of your ego?" Marcus forced himself to keep moving forward, recognizing the psychological attack for what it was. This wasn't his deepest fear. This was just the warm-up. The trial was probing his mind, searching for the terror that would truly paralyze him. He found it in the next chamber. The room expanded into a vast recreation of Earth's United Nations building, but filled with the bodies of everyone he had ever cared about. His parents, his sister, former colleagues, friends from childhood, all dead, their faces frozen in expressions of accusation and disappointment. And standing among them was Princess Lirelei, her beautiful features corrupted by death and betrayal. "This is what your choices lead to," she said in a voice like dying stars. "You could have accepted the Queen's offer. Humanity could have lived safely under our protection. Instead, you chose pride over wisdom, and everyone you love paid the price. This time, Marcus felt his knees buckle. The fear was so primal, so visceral, that his rational mind struggled to maintain control. This was his true terror, not personal death, but being responsible for the destruction of everything he held dear. But then he heard Captain Martinez's voice echoing through the chamber, distorted but recognizable. "Marcus! Remember what we discussed. Fear is information, not truth." The reminder cut through his paralysis like a knife. He had discussed this exact scenario with his team during their preparation. They had known the trial would attack their psychological weaknesses, and they had developed strategies for supporting each other even when physically separated. "You're not real," Marcus told the false lie rally firmly, "and my fear of failure doesn't change the fact that we're doing the right thing." The illusion wavered and began to dissolve, but the chamber wasn't finished with him yet. New horrors manifested, scenes of galactic war caused by human unpredictability, images of Earth being destroyed by alien weapons, visions of himself dying alone and forgotten in the void between stars. Each fear was more terrifying than the last, but Marcus had found his anchor. Every time he felt himself weakening, he focused on the voices of his team echoing through the chamber walls. They were facing their own nightmares, but still finding the strength to encourage each other. Dr. Y. Kupri, Park's voice, shaky but determined. "The statistical probability of these outcomes is virtually zero. Don't let them manipulate your cognitive biases." Engineer Thompson, anger overriding fear. "These are just psychological projections. I've seen scarier things in malfunctioning reactor cores." Communications Officer Kim, his natural optimism shining through. "Whatever we're seeing, it's not real. The real universe is still out there waiting for us." And Captain Martinez, her military training evident even in extremis. "Stay focused on the mission. We move forward together." The beacon Marcus was seeking turned out to be at the intersection of all 5 individual passages, a point that could only be reached if all team members arrived simultaneously. This required them to coordinate their movements while dealing with their personal fears, communicating through the distorting effects of the chamber's psychological attacks. The beacon itself was beautiful, a crystalline structure that pulsed with warm golden light that seemed to push back the oppressive atmosphere of the fear labyrinth. But reaching it required each team member to pass through a final challenge. They had to willingly walk into their worst fear and continue moving despite their terror. For Marcus, this meant walking through a doorway that showed him Earth burning while accusatory voices told him it was all his fault. For Captain Martinez, it was advancing through a battlefield filled with the bodies of soldiers she had failed to save. Dr. Park had to navigate a laboratory where all his research was being used to create weapons of mass destruction. Thompson faced a reactor meltdown that she was powerless to prevent. Kim walked through scenes of failed communications leading to devastating misunderstandings between species. But they did it. They walked through their fears together, supporting each other with words of encouragement that somehow penetrated the chamber's psychological barriers. When they reached the beacon, its light dispelled all the illusions at once, leaving them standing together in a simple, clean chamber filled with warm, natural light. "Trial of courage completed," the chamber announced. "Evaluation exceptional. Note: candidate species demonstrates unprecedented ability to maintain cooperative behavior under extreme psychological stress." This characteristic is highly valued. The trial of compassion presented an entirely different kind of challenge. The chamber was beautiful rather than threatening, filled with soft light and peaceful music that seemed to emanate from the very air. But the scenario it presented was perhaps the most difficult yet. They found themselves in what appeared to be a refugee camp filled with beings from dozens of different species who were clearly suffering from starvation, disease, and despair. The beings were so realistic that Marcus had to remind himself this was still a trial, not an actual humanitarian crisis. "Objective," the chamber announced, "allocate the available resources to maximize benefit. Resources are severely limited. Not all beings can be saved. Choose wisely. The cruel mathematics of the situation became clear immediately. There were medical supplies that could save 10 critically injured beings or be used to treat 100 less severely wounded. Food that could keep 50 beings alive for a month or sustain 500 for a week. Energy cells that could power life support for the most vulnerable or provide basic lighting and warmth for everyone. "It's a classic ethical dilemma," Dr. Park observed quietly. "Utilitarian calculus versus individual worth. Save the many or save the few who need the most help." "There has to be another way," Kim insisted. "Every trial so far has had a solution that refused the basic premise." Marcus studied the situation more carefully and began to notice details that didn't quite fit. The beings in the camp were organized in family groups, but the groups seemed artificial, almost staged. The distribution of different species was too perfectly balanced to be realistic, and the resources themselves were arranged in suspiciously neat categories. "What if this isn't really about resource allocation?" he wondered aloud. "What do you mean?" Thompson asked. "Look at how everything is organized. It's too perfect, too clean." Real refugee situations are chaotic, unpredictable. This looks like a textbook scenario designed to test our ethical frameworks. Captain Martinez caught on immediately. "You're suggesting the real test isn't how we allocate resources, but whether we accept the premise that allocation is necessary." Marcus nodded, his mind racing through the implications. "Every other trial has tested our willingness to think beyond conventional approaches. What if the compassionate solution isn't to choose who lives and who dies, but to reject that choice entirely?" They began working with frantic energy to find alternatives to the forced choice scenario. Thompson analyzed the power systems and discovered that the energy cells could be recharged using thermal differentials in the chamber itself. Dr. Park identified which medical supplies could be synthesized from common materials, using basic chemistry. Kim established communication networks that allowed the refugee groups to share resources more efficiently among themselves. Marcus coordinated the effort while Captain Martinez provided security and logistics support. Instead of making tragic choices about who deserved help, they worked to expand the available options so that everyone could receive at least basic care. The breakthrough came when they realized that the beings in the scenario weren't just passive victims waiting for help. They were intelligent entities with their own skills and capabilities. By organizing them into cooperative work groups, the humans were able to dramatically increase the effective value of the available resources. "The solution isn't about having enough resources," Marcus announced as the scenario transformed around them. "It's about using those resources cooperatively to create sustainable systems that help everyone." "Trial of compassion completed," the chamber announced. "Evaluation extraordinary." Note: Candidate species demonstrates novel approach to ethical problem solving, rejecting false choices in favor of systemic solutions. This approach is unprecedented. The trial of strength was perhaps the most straightforward of the challenges they had faced so far, but also the most physically demanding. The chamber presented them with a series of increasingly difficult physical obstacles that required not just individual strength and endurance, but coordinated effort to overcome. They faced gravity fields that changed direction without warning, forcing them to constantly adapt their movement strategies. They climbed walls that shifted and flowed like liquid while they were scaling them. They crossed chasms on bridges that dissolved behind them as they moved, requiring perfect timing and coordination. But the true test of strength wasn't physical, it was mental and emotional. Each obstacle was designed to push them beyond their normal limits to the point where giving up would seem like the rational choice. The chamber gradually increased the difficulty until they were operating at the very edge of human capability. Thompson collapsed during the third obstacle, her engineering expertise useless against the pure physical demands of the trial. Marcus and Martinez had to carry her while still completing the challenges themselves. When Kim injured his leg during a particularly brutal climbing sequence, Dr. Park took on his share of the load despite his own exhaustion. "I can't do this," Thompson gasped during a brief respite between obstacles. "I'm slowing everyone down. Leave me here and complete the trial." "Not happening," Martinez replied firmly. "We succeed together or we fail together." She's right, Marcus added. This isn't just about individual strength. It's about the strength that comes from refusing to abandon each other. They modified their approach to accommodate Thompson's limitations, finding creative ways to use leverage and teamwork to overcome obstacles that would have been impossible for any individual. Kim's communication skills proved crucial in coordinating their movements, while Dr. Park's analytical mind helped them find the most efficient solutions to physical problems. The final obstacle was a seemingly impossible climb up a smooth, vertical wall that stretched far above their heads. There were no handholds, no obvious weaknesses in the surface, and the wall itself seemed to repel any attempt to find purchase. It's not about climbing, Thompson realized, studying the problem from a different angle. Look at the energy patterns in the wall. It's designed to resist individual effort, but it might respond differently to coordinated pressure. They formed a human pyramid with Martinez and Marcus as the base, Dr. Park and Kim in the middle, and Thompson at the top. But instead of trying to climb the wall, they pressed against it together, each person adding their strength to a single focused point of pressure. The wall began to respond, creating handholds and footholds that appeared only when all 5 humans were working in perfect coordination. They climbed as a single unit, each person's movements synchronized with the others, until they reached the top together. Trial of strength completed, the chamber announced. Evaluation: exceptional. Note: candidate species demonstrates that true strength lies not in individual capability but in collective determination and mutual support. As they prepared for the final trial, Marcus felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. They had passed 4 of the 5 trials, each time finding solutions that had apparently surprised the ancient testing protocols. But he knew that the final trial, the trial of unity, would be the most challenging yet. Princess Lirelei met them outside the 4th chamber, her golden patterns brighter than ever with excitement and pride. "You have amazed everyone," she told them quietly. "The way you've approached these trials has sparked discussions throughout the Empire about cooperation, compassion, and the value of different perspectives. Some are calling it a new paradigm for galactic civilization." "And others?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Others are terrified of what change might mean," she admitted, "but that's exactly why your success is so important. You're proving that change doesn't have to mean destruction." Queen Valeriana approached them, her cosmic eyes swirling with complex emotions that Marcus couldn't begin to interpret. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics of what might have been grudging respect. "You have performed adequately in the trials thus far," she said, the words clearly difficult for her to speak, "but the final trial will test whether your species can truly unite not just among yourselves but with others fundamentally different from you." She paused, her gaze focusing on Marcus with laser intensity. "The trial of unity has broken more species than all the others combined. It requires you to forge a lasting alliance with beings whose nature is completely incompatible with your own. Many who have reached this point have discovered that unity was impossible and chose mutual destruction rather than accept failure." Marcus felt a chill at her words, but also a familiar surge of human determination. They had come this far by refusing to accept conventional limitations. If the final trial required them to achieve the impossible, then they would find a way to make the impossible possible. "We're ready," he said simply. Queen Valeriana's cosmic eyes flared with something that might have been approval. "We shall see." The final trial chamber was unlike anything they had encountered before. As Marcus and his team stepped inside, they found themselves in what appeared to be a perfect reproduction of the galactic Senate chambers, but populated with beings that seemed to embody pure discord and hostility. There were 5 entities waiting for them, each representing a fundamentally different approach to existence that seemed specifically designed to clash with human nature. The first was a creature of pure logic, its crystalline form pulsing with mathematical equations that formed and dissolved in the air around it. It radiated cold rationality that made emotional connection impossible. The second entity appeared to be made of living darkness, constantly shifting and changing, representing pure chaos and unpredictability. Where the logic creature was rigidly structured, this being seemed incapable of maintaining any consistent form or thought pattern for more than a few seconds. The third was a collective consciousness, so vast and interconnected that individual thought seemed meaningless in its presence. It spoke in 1,000 voices at once, each contradicting the others, making communication nearly impossible. The fourth entity embodied pure aggression and dominance, its form radiating violence and the need to establish hierarchical control over everything around it. It seemed to view every interaction as a potential conflict to be won. The final being was perhaps the most unsettling, a creature of absolute stagnation and resistance to change. It existed in perfect stillness, emanating an aura that made even thinking about new ideas feel exhausting and futile. The trial of unity, the chamber announced in tones that seemed to come from all 5 entities simultaneously. Objective: forge a lasting alliance between your species and these representatives of incompatible civilizations. Time limit: until the triple sun conjunction ends. Failure condition: if any alliance breaks down completely, all participants will be destroyed. Marcus felt his heart sink as he realized the true nature of the challenge. They weren't just supposed to coexist with these beings, they had to create genuine alliances that could survive indefinite contact, and the entities seemed specifically chosen to represent everything that human nature found difficult or impossible to work with. "How are we supposed to ally with pure chaos?" Kim whispered, staring at the constantly shifting darkness entity. "It doesn't even maintain a coherent form long enough to have a conversation. And how do you negotiate with something that only understands dominance hierarchies?" Thompson added, eyeing the aggressive entity warily. Park was already pulling out his portable analysis equipment, trying to understand the fundamental nature of each entity. "We need to find common ground," he said, his scientific mind automatically seeking solutions. "There has to be something that connects all conscious beings, regardless of their apparent incompatibilities." Captain Martinez was assessing the situation from a tactical perspective. "The chamber said lasting alliance, not temporary cooperation. We need to find ways to create genuine mutual benefit that will survive long-term contact." Marcus studied each entity carefully, looking for patterns beneath their obvious hostility. After several minutes of observation, he began to notice something crucial. Each entity seemed trapped by its own nature, locked into patterns that prevented it from achieving its fundamental goals. The logic creature wanted perfect understanding, but its rigid rationality prevented it from comprehending the emotional and intuitive aspects of existence that were crucial for complete knowledge. The chaos entity sought ultimate freedom and unpredictability, but its inability to maintain coherent form or thought made meaningful action impossible. The collective consciousness desired perfect unity, but its 1,000 conflicting voices prevented it from achieving any consensus. The aggressive entity wanted dominance and control, but its hostility drove away potential allies, leaving it fundamentally isolated. The stagnation entity craved perfect stability, but its resistance to change meant it could never adapt to new circumstances. "I think I understand," Marcus said slowly. "Each entity is trapped by its own nature. They can't achieve what they really want because their fundamental characteristics prevent it." "So how does that help us?" Martinez asked. "Because humans are generalists," Marcus replied, the solution beginning to crystallize in his mind. "We're not trapped by single characteristics the way they are. We can be logical when necessary, chaotic when appropriate, unified when required, aggressive when defending what matters, and stable when change isn't needed. We can help each entity overcome its limitations." They began by approaching the logic creature, whose crystalline form pulsed with increasingly complex mathematical theorems as they drew near. "Your logic is perfect within its domain, Dr. Park addressed it, but incomplete because it cannot account for variables that don't fit mathematical models. We can provide the intuitive and emotional data that will complete your understanding." The logic creature's equations slowed their shifting. "Explain the process by which emotional data can be quantified and incorporated into logical frameworks." "That's exactly the point," Marcus interjected. "It can't be quantified in the traditional." The Queen said no to the wedding. But the alien princess had other plans. HFY. Best HFY Stories.